Welcome to the online class focusing on evaluating oral language assessments and assessment for and of learning. Part 1 deals with evaluating oral language assessments. Before viewing this screencast, please be sure that you have viewed the link of the student talking about the cell phone and the landline. Follow the link from your online agenda. Once you have done that, come back to the screencast and proceed with the rest of the learning. When evaluating students, we want to think about what content and language understandings they have. This tool helps us do that. Let's go over some important information about this student. This student is a middle school student somewhere between the grades of 7th and 9th grade. On the California Language Assessment, she scored an intermediate or a proficient, which corresponds to a developing or expanding level on the WIDA access test that we now use in Colorado. That would have been her overall score. The type of interaction we used for this assessment was an oral interview. We wanted to see in an informal conversation what she was able to tell us about a cell phone and a landline. The language function that is key in this assessment was compare and contrast specifically. Whenever we're talking about how things differ, contrast is the function we are working with. Some other important information about this student is that she is a long-term English learner, which means that it has taken her longer than the typical 4 to 7 years to exit the program. In middle school, she is still in the program, although she has started her educational career in the United States and has been attending U.S. schools since kindergarten. We also know that she had prior experiences with cell phones and landlines, so we should not assume that she does not have any content understanding about this. The tools we used to evaluate were for content, just our general social understanding, and then language, we used this WIDA speaking rubric. Please pull out this tool as we work through the rest of this screencast. First, we're going to take a look at what were the students' content understanding. Here we have noted for you exactly what the student said in this interaction. This is her oral script. As you reflect on this, think about what strengths she has. Start there. What does she understand about cell phones and landlines? And then think about next steps. What might she need to be a little bit clearer on? Take a moment to pause this screencast and reflect on your own, making annotations for yourself. You'll notice a few things in the first interaction. She notes that a landline is not able to fit in your pocket or your purse, that landlines are connected. She also realizes that this is different than a cell phone. Cell phones need chargers and batteries to keep them going. So I circled these sections and note she does have some general understanding about the uses of cell phones and landlines and some tools like the charger or batteries that go with cell phones. At the bottom, she does try to describe some different uses, although some more clarification is needed. After annotating the script, I go back to my evaluation template tool, and under content understandings, I start with what strengths I noticed she had. She was able to tell us some general things about landlines and cell phones as far as some parts they have or how they are used. I note this on the template. As far as next steps, I would like her to be more specific about key features that would denote the differences between a cell phone and a landline. Notice in the parentheses how I've been very specific about what those differences might be. You will want to think about doing this much specificity for your own oral script on your case study student. Now that we've thought through content, we can move on to evaluating the language that the student used. The first is to think about linguistic complexity. Remember that when we're thinking about linguistic complexity, we're thinking about what does the language sound like at a phrase, sentence, or paragraph level. Take a look at the oral script again. Pause this screencast when you are ready and reflect on the linguistic complexity, also called discourse complexity, that this student has. Pull out your WIDA rubric, have it alongside you, and annotate what you notice. At the top, you'll notice that she has somewhat of a simple sentence, and she is trying to approximate a more complex sentence. Things that are different: the telephone's a little bit bigger, probably, and can't fit in your pocket or your purse. The last part there, can't fit in your pocket or your purse. If she had added the word it, she would have had a simple sentence there. There are just a few pieces left out. So here I wrote, it's pretty much a simple sentence, and she is also approximating using the conjunction and. Later on, she also approximates using more complex sentences. However, when she does that, there are a few key words that she misses. So again, I note that she is using mostly phrases, some incomplete sentences, but noting that it's just missing a word or two here or there. At the end, I see the same thing, kind of the same, but it's just got their different kind of phone. Definitely phrases and some incomplete sentences. So as I go back to my speaking rubric, I realize that under the beginning level, level 2, phrases and short oral sentences, and I feel as if this explains most of the language she is using as far as linguistic complexity or discourse complexity goes. So I go back to my evaluation tool and make note of the strengths and next steps that I am thinking about for this student. Notice under strengths that I put down what level she is. I note what behaviors make me believe she is this level: phrases, simple sentences, and I also note that she is approximating the use of more expanded sentences, although this is more like a level 3. I feel as if most of her language falls in level 2 in this area. For next steps, I think that complete sentences and expanded sentences would be a great place to push her, especially since she is almost there as it is. She is making very close approximations with some conjunctions like but and she is just missing a word or two. I also am specific about what conjunctions I would like her to use to make those expanded sentences. I would like her to use conjunctions that fit with the function of compare and contrast. Contrast explicitly, using words like but, differ by, whereas, or versus. Note here how specific I have been about the language I wish to hear. Now that we've discussed linguistic complexity, we can move on to vocabulary usage. Remember, with vocabulary usage, we're thinking about is the language general, specific, or technical, or somewhere in between. Take a look at the script again and pause at your convenience to reflect on what you notice about the student's vocabulary. Keeping in mind that vocabulary isn't always just one word. It may be a short phrase related to the content area. At the beginning, she notes this description: the telephone's a little bigger, meaning a little bigger than the cell phone. This is pretty general language for the content. Later, she talks about telephones are connected by, connected. Here, it is clear that she is groping for vocabulary, perhaps cord or line. However, connected by is a more specific verb phrase, and I note this on the annotation. Later, she uses the word charger. This is also more specific vocabulary, and I make note of this on the oral script. At the end, I notice that she continues to grope for some vocabulary, especially around the uses for the cell phone and the landline. When I look back on the WIDA rubric, I see that a developing level 3 really describes the vocabulary I've just seen her use. So I record these specific pieces on the template. Level 3, some general and some specific vocabulary. Groping is evident at various times, especially with connected by as an example. As far as next steps for vocabulary, I would like her to use more specific vocabulary for parts of the phones and for the uses of the phone. In the parentheses, I note some explicit vocabulary that she may be able to use. Finally, I move on to language control. Language control helps us think about how organized, cohesive, and comprehensible is the language, and where might that comprehensibility break down. Take a moment again and pause the screencast to think about language control, also called language forms and conventions. You will notice in the first section that her language is generally comprehensible. You can get the gist, but it breaks down when going beyond a simple phrase in the first sentence. At the end, you see that she continues to grope for language structures. So as I refer back to the rubric, I note that a level 2, the beginning stage, seems to most accurately describe the student's language control. I make note of my observations on the language template, noting exactly what level I believe she is and those language behaviors that make me believe that. Then, in the next steps section, I note how I want her language to sound more organized and comprehensible, specifically when going beyond just simple sentences. Now that I have written down everything I've noticed about the student's content and language understandings, I want to synthesize and make some manageable things to share with the student during a conference. This is the synthesis section. I don't simply want to write everything I've already written in this section. I want to think about what would give me the most bang for my buck with this student. Sometimes the content understanding can be helped by the language understanding, and in those scenarios, I want to try to correlate those strengths or next steps. Take a moment to look at everything we've written down for the student and think about what might you share with this student. What would be the biggest bang for your buck in moving this student forward? Pause this now and resume when you are ready. You'll notice that for content, I thought that I might share with her that she generally understands the main differences of cell phones and landlines, and that a language strength is that she has some general vocabulary around cell phones and she's generally comprehensible. I can kind of get what she's saying. As far as next step, this is the best case scenario, because when I think about her content next step needing to describe some other key features that bring out the differences between two phones, I know that she needs specific vocabulary in order to have this content understanding or to show me her content understanding. So I make this also a language next step, more specific vocabulary for parts of phones. I also add this idea of mortar for compare and contrast, seeing as some of her language is somewhat incomprehensible, and I believe that giving her these key conjunctions will help her be more organized. Now you try it. Draft and or revise your own oral script on your student using these tools to support you. After you have finished this draft, please answer the reflection questions on the agenda. Record them on the graphic organizer that is web linked on the agenda and upload this reflection to Dropbox by the night of the online class. Below are the questions you will be answering. Part 2 of this class deals with assessment for and of learning. For this section, you simply need to view the video from Stiggins. He talks about the key differences between assessment of and for learning. You can find this video by following the web link on your agenda. After you have viewed the video, or while you're viewing the video, please take notes and upload this note taker to Dropbox. You can find the note taker under online class. You can also find it web linked on the agenda. After you have viewed the Stiggins video, go back to the reflection template that you used for part 1 and reflect on these questions. I will see you all next time in class. Please email if you have any questions.